We have a few minutes, so I am inviting Bob Lebel to the microphone. Bob is a member of King of Kings in Liverpool and has served for the last number of years. I don't know, how many years has it been?
For the task force?
Yeah.
4 years.
4 years on the ELCA task force that's been developing the social statement on genetics. He's going to be presenting a workshop this afternoon, and tomorrow we hope to have some plenary time to discuss that if you wish to have conversation about it. But we thought since we had the time this morning, we'd let him make some introductions about what's important about that document, what you might look for, whatever else you want to say. It's a plug for your workshop. It gets the conversation started. I just want to say how proud and pleased I am that we have had a member of our synod who's been a significant part of the development of this statement. He's been willing to give his time for this period of time, and I know is looking forward to being a voting member at the church-wide assembly, hopefully when it's adopted. Mr. Bob Lebel. Dr. Bob Lebel, I think.
Thanks. Good morning. The task force was constituted 4 years ago after a church-wide assembly voted to tackle this project of a social statement on genetics. The idea came to the church-wide assembly a couple of rounds back from a Midwestern bishop whose congregation is almost entirely, his synod is almost entirely farm people. And he was struck by reading about things that have to do with genetics that impacts individual lives, but also by constantly being barraged with questions and issues from his congregations about genetically modified organisms and questions about what Christians might think about the use of genetically modified organisms, plant and animal. So he proposed the idea, and the Synod Assembly decided to pursue it. I was part of the study group that was convened to give consideration to what the outlines of such a project might be. And then after that, the committee, or the task force, was appointed, and I was among those appointed to it. My background is in genetics, clinical genetics. I teach at SUNY Upstate Medical University, but I also have a background in philosophy and theology. I help teach the ethics courses for the medical students, as well as teach them genetics when they get to that part of their studies. So I have some background in both, and it was quite an amazing experience to be a part of this task force. The task force had a bishop, a farmer, a clinical geneticist, a genetic counselor, a guy who's retired after having been the president of the company that produced one of the key tools that were used in the entire Human Genome Project. So this was an entrepreneurial geneticist who did very well, producing tools that were crucial to the Human Genome Project. We had a farmer, several pastors, some theologians, some philosophers and ethicists, and not just any old philosophers and ethicists, but some really recognizable names. If you look at the list of the names, you'll recognize some of them as people who are highly productive. Ted Peters particularly comes to mind. I was talking to someone at breakfast who knows him personally, and we were getting a laugh out of how it's hard to keep track of his books because they keep coming out so fast. And he was a member of the task force. So it was an awesome group of people and an amazing experience to go through. We studied and we gave lectures to each other, and we brought people to give us lectures, and we generated a study guide, which I hope a lot of you enjoyed using a couple years ago. And we enjoyed going through hundreds of comments that came back from all over the country about the study guide and what it taught us. And then we drafted something, and then we submitted it to all of you, and we enjoyed going through hundreds of your comments on that. And if you read the first draft and read the second draft, you know very well that we really listened to the comments, because the second draft is quite different from the first. And now it's finally before us. The issues in front of us are the same issues that everybody else has in front of them, but we're asked to think about them as Lutheran Christians. And what the task force tried to do was to establish a statement about theological anthropology that allows us to articulate a place to stand in which to look at issues and prayerfully consider the issues to decide what we think about those issues. We avoided, quite successfully, being proscriptive or prescriptive. That is, we avoided saying genetics ought to do this and ought not to do that. We tried to avoid that as much as we could, and instead help people to think through what it means to be a Lutheran Christian, what it means to be a saved sinner, and to be confronted by the issues at hand, from farming genetics, from clinical genetics, from scientific laboratory genetics. Those issues, think about them, pray over them, and respond to them. So I hope that you're finding it an interesting document to read, and I look forward this afternoon to actually twice standing up in front of smaller groups to talk about that and to field questions. I'm not prepared to give a lecture. I'm prepared to hear your questions and comments and to respond to those and to enter a discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Dr. Lebel.